Okay, so let's get started. My name is Igor Chigrin. I'm the government funding expert with Fair Grant Writing, and I appreciate your time and availability for attending the webinar today. During today's webinar, we'll go through the updates and some information about new programs and updated government funding programs that are available for businesses in Canada. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. You can use the chat option to ask your questions. Ideally, if you can be on mute for the duration of the webinar, that'd be great, just to make sure that there's no interruption. I can only share my screen, but I don't have the access to the list of participants anymore. Periodically, I may need to switch the screens and admit more folks, at least if they're stuck in the meeting room. So let's get started. Just for those that don't know Fair Grant Writing, we are a professional grant writing firm with a mission to help Canadian businesses to survive and thrive by unlocking their access to the government funding. We are Canadian owned and operated business, have been around for 14 years and helped we submitted over 12,000 applications over the course of the past years with 90% success rate. All right, so let me start with a quick case study on what's possible. This is one of our clients in the aerospace industry. We helped them to secure $8.5 million in government interest-free loan to support the acquisition of state-of-the-art production equipment and expand their facility. There's no shortage of government funding. It's more about your business's capacity and capability to come up with the projects, because as I will show you later on, the government only allocates the funding for certain projects. It doesn't helicopter money, fortunately or unfortunately. Let me also outline three different types of the government funding. I will use the term government grant here a lot, but when I use it, I actually refer more to the government funding in general. And the government funding consists of the grants, loans, and tax credits. The government grant is an non-repayable funding that government awards for a certain purpose or project. The government loan is repayable, but in most cases it's interest-free. And also some of the government loans have loan forgiveness clauses. So they can forgive part or sometimes the entire loan. The tax credit is a non-repayable funding as well, so you don't have to pay this tax credits money back, but it's awarded retroactively. It's awarded retroactively for at the end of your fiscal year. As I mentioned, the government only provides funding for certain purposes. Some of those purposes include purchasing equipment, skills training, hiring, export business development, software implementation and training, research and development, and business expansion. Please keep in mind that the government does not provide operational funding, and there's no such a government grant that would pay for your, say, utilities, labor, or material costs. Apologies for that. It's a new platform, so apparently it doesn't admit people automatically. So unfortunately, for people that come late, I have to go back to the tool and admit them automatically. But let's hope that everyone is here now. So let me go through most popular programs first. So the first one is Canada Job Grant. It's the program for skills training, and any business in Canada, pretty much anywhere in the province and territories that offer this program, can access this funding. And the good thing about this program is that the government doesn't dictate what kind of training you should take and who should take the training. It's your choice as an employer. And the government provides between 2/3 and 5/6 of the training costs, up to $10,000 per trainee. Now, if you are committing to hiring an unemployed individual, then you could get up to 100% of the training costs. Keep in mind that only third-party training costs are eligible. Any in-house training will not be, unfortunately, eligible. Ontario Made Manufacturing Tax Credit is the good example of the tax credit available for manufacturers to buy equipment or property. In this particular case, the in Ontario that are in manufacturing or processing can get up to 15% of eligible expenses at the end of their fiscal year. But of course, as I mentioned, this is the tax credits. This funding is not available right away when the purchase is completed. You have to wait for the fiscal year end to apply for this funding. The other program, actually, it's not even the one program, it's the whole universe of the program. That's called Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership. It is available for businesses that are engaged in primary production, such as farming, ranching, or food processing. So any food and beverage manufacturers, breweries, and also cannabis product manufacturers. So they qualify for these programs. Again, there are many programs under this, but typically they are focused on helping the businesses improve productivity, implement technology, expand capacity. There's also a big focus on food safety and traceability. The criteria and funding amounts and allocations that vary by program and by province, because this is a joint funding between the federal government and all provincial governments. Typically, you get 35% of your expenses reimbursed through one of these programs. But again, for the timelines, you have to check where you are and what sort of projects you want to accomplish. One of our clients in the beverage industry received 2.3 million in interest-free loan with $500,000 forgivable portion to support purchasing of the state-of-the-art equipment. In their particular case, they needed the equipment for labeling and packaging, and the purpose of the project was to move away from plastic sleeves and the print right on cans. Speaking of the new technologies, I wanted to bring up this program specifically for the participants of this webinar from the province of Ontario. There's a Critical Industrial Technologies Initiative program that provides funding for those businesses that implement new critical technologies, and that technology is AI, blockchain, 5G, robotics, cybersecurity, and quantum. So if you are looking to implement the projects in one of these technology areas, then you could get 33% of eligible project expenses up to $500,000. The next section for funding is the research and development. The Industrial Research Assistance Program and Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Credits are two major programs that pretty much incentivize the research and development that's happening in Canada. There are slight differences between them, but the main one is that IRAP, the first one, requires the pre-approval. So you have to apply for this program before you start your R&D project, and you have to also wait for the decision. But sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes the opportunity is in front of you, and you don't have to wait for approval. In this case, you can get started and do your R&D project. And then at the end of your fiscal year, you apply for the tax credit, and you have an opportunity to get the tax credit back upon approval. And by the way, the tax credits have nothing to do with taxes. So that the only reason they are called tax credits is because they are administered by Canada revenue agencies, and they are tied to your corporate tax return. But effectively, it's the grant, non-payable grant that you receive together with your corporate tax assessment. Okay, and then if you don't owe anything to CRA, you get cash in the bank account. If you do, then they reduce your tax liability by the amount of the tax credit. Specifically for those that are interested in AI and those Canadian companies that develop AI solutions, specifically deep learning and generative AI, there's a separate IRAP program dedicated specifically for that. It's called the NRC IRAP AI Assist, and it works only with AI companies in Canada that develop the solutions, AI solutions, and incentivizes them to develop more. The next one is a very popular program called CanExport SMEs. This is the program for export business development. It incentivizes Canadian companies to diversify their markets and find clients in the new export markets. And it's one of the conditions that you can only use this funding for marketing activities in the new markets. And then there's a whole definition for it. This program is for small to medium-sized businesses, but still have to be mature. You have to have at least 3 employees, and the minimum sales requirement is 300,000. The program provides 50% of the eligible expansion marketing costs, up to 500,000. The deadline for the current program is May 29th, 2026. But this program typically has 2 to 3 intakes a year, even if you miss this one, you probably will have a chance to reapply in the fall. The program, though, is very popular. If you can apply now, it's better to apply now. This is one of the example of a client who actually applied and got funding for this from this CanExport SME program. In this case, it's the video game studio from Toronto, Ontario. They received 500,000 for promoting their video game expertise online, but also offline, and they use this money to go to the relevant conventions in the United States. Clean technology tax credit is another tax credit opportunity. That means again, you apply for this tax credit at the end of your fiscal year. But only if the certain conditions are met. There is a list that you see on the slide, the list of eligible clean technology that you should purchase in order to qualify for this tax credit. And then you get between 30 and 40% of the costs. Like, for example, there is a solar heating equipment, there is a solar panel, there is all sorts of energy equipment, including modular nuclear reactors. I honestly haven't heard any business purchasing small modular nuclear reactors, but why not? In case if your business needs it, then you just know that this acquisition is eligible for 30 to 40% reimbursement. Now let's switch the gears and talk about the federal development funds. So the federal government provides funding for businesses across Canada to scale rapidly. And these particular programs are not for like one-time opportunity expenses type of a project. It's for massive, large-scale expansion. And if your expansion is under 10 million, there's one type of program. If it's over 10 million, then it's the other stream of the program. So the federal government provides the interest-free loan that could be up to 50% of the project expenses. And typically the project expenses include technology, facility expansion or construction or equipment. Again, these are large-scale projects. They're typically here to support large-scale expansion of technology, manufacturing, food companies, and also to support foreign direct investment in Canada. And they are delivered by the local regional development agencies. So they are still federal agencies, but they are located in the Canadian provinces or region. For example, there's FedDev Ontario that's responsible for Southern Ontario. There's FedNor that's responsible for Northern. There's CAD Quebec agency, the federal agency responsible for Quebec. Prairie Cam that covers three provinces: Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Pacific Cam for British Columbia, etc. So if you are expanding, you need to talk to one of these agencies, and then you can get the interest-free loan. That could be 50% of your project expenses. Ontario government has a similar approach, but within Ontario, they pretty much split the province into three large areas: Southwestern Ontario, Eastern, and Northern. And then there's also Greater Toronto area that is separated from those regions. There's also a dedicated funding for Southern Ontario in general. That includes the Greater Toronto area, Western and Eastern Ontario. So it's a little confusing, but anyway, the point is similar. The provincial government incentivizes large-scale expansion of the businesses in Ontario, and you could get typically 15% of your expenses in a grant or interest-free loan. And if it's in Northern Ontario, you could get up to 50%. Now let's switch the gears a little bit and talk about the tariff relief and remission programs. There are a few of them, and unfortunately, since last year, this whole tariff war started, the government came up with a few programs to help Canadian businesses navigate this tariff situation. First of all, if your Canadian business is impacted by Canadian tariff, right? Because Canada still has 25% tariff on certain steel products that are steel inputs that are coming from the US, or automotive parts. So if your business, Canadian business, is subject to those 25% tariff or surtaxes, how they call it, then you may qualify for the tariff remission program. It is a new program that is designed specifically for these cases when you cannot avoid purchasing the goods, parts, or materials from the US that are subject to this 25% tariff. So you have to submit the application and prove that you cannot source this anywhere in Canada or elsewhere, let's say with any country, from any country that has a free trade agreement with Canada, and you need to submit this application to the Department of Finance with a bunch of other attachments. And so they make a determination, they make a decision. So what they could do, they could make a decision that you get a refund of all the surtaxes paid to date, or they can make a decision that you no longer have to pay the surtax, or both of these decisions. So definitely worthwhile to apply for in case if you are impacted by this unfortunate tariff situation. There isn't any program though, unfortunately, that helps you to deal with the US tariff. So if you are a Canadian company and you ship goods to the US, and it's either you or your US buyers have to pay their tariff. Unfortunately, there isn't any good solution for that yet, but we'll see. We'll see where the world's going. So hopefully they will create some kind of solution for that as well. Customs duty drawback is another program, but that program was around for a while, like surely over 20 years. That program though has a special scenario, and the scenario is that if you imported the goods and these goods are subject to Canadian tariff or surtax or whatever, the government could reimburse this tariff that you have paid, but only on the condition that the imported goods must be exported from Canada. They could be exported as is, or they could be exported as part of the finished goods. So that's a bit of a niche, I'd say, niche program. And in the past, it wasn't used much because Canada was pretty much duty free with most of the countries. But still, I wanted to make sure that you know about this program. And if you, let's say, use the American steel, you pay 25%, but you make something out of that steel, and then you say you ship the finished goods to, let's say, France, you may qualify to get this 25% duty back through this customs duty drawback program. A couple of other tariff-related programs. This one, Regional Tariff Response Initiative. This one is provided by one of those federal development agencies that I mentioned earlier. This could be a grant or it could be an interest-free loan, depending on your situation, also your appetite. So if you're looking for something under $1 million, you could get a grant. Otherwise, you will most likely get the interest-free loan. At least that's what our experience shows us. These programs are very focused on the impacted industries such as steel and automotive. But that said, if you are not in one of those industries, you may still qualify, especially if your sales are down 25% or more, hopefully less than that. But unfortunately, stuff happens. Or another scenario is that if you are impacted by the trade disputes and, for example, you can no longer access your suppliers or your inputs become way more expensive and you lose your competitiveness in that case, you can still qualify and apply for this program. What they though expect is that they don't expect you to use this money to compensate your losses. Rather than that, they expect you to use this money to invest in facility and equipment, in your people, in your technology, to become more productive, more competitive, and to reduce expenses. So that's the main purpose of this Regional Tariff Response Initiative. It's available coast to coast. Just depending on where you are, you may need to talk to a different agency that is responsible for delivering this program. Ontario has a somewhat similar program. It really is similar in design. It's just like one program comes from the federal budget, this one's from Ontario budget. There are some pros and cons for the use of each of the programs. One is more flexible than the other. But still, if you are heavily impacted by these tariff disputes, you have an opportunity to tap into both of these pockets, and you have an opportunity to get both of those funding programs. That's one of the clients actually in the steel industry. They make household steel appliances. The problem that they had was that part of their production was in China, and they have a big market in the United States as well. So they had to move away from manufacturing in Asia. So they received $1.5 million in government grant through one of these tariff-related programs to basically reshore their manufacturing from Asia to Canada. We're at the end of the section where I went through the government funding programs and updates. Let me now share some tips with you how to maximize chances of your success when you are applying for government funding. First of all, you must understand the criteria, the assessment criteria. You may call the funder, but most likely you will find this assessment criteria in the guidelines. The programs are different. They have different priorities and goals. Some of them, for example, expect you to create jobs. Others expect you to earn more money, and then others expect you to develop a new product or process, or maybe do some R&D. And it's not necessarily that you need to check all these boxes. In many cases, one or two is enough, but you need to understand before you apply what exactly the government is looking for in each particular case, and whether you can deliver on the government's expectations. The other tips for ensuring your success is knowing the eligibility criteria and the deadline of the program. Stacking is also something that you need to know of if you apply for different programs with one project. Typically, there is a limitation for the amount of government money you can use for one single project. In most cases, you cannot start the project before you got the approval from the government. You also need to make sure that you report on your progress to the government, because reporting and claim submission is part of the process. The application is surely a time-consuming exercise, but that's not the end. Also, when your project is approved, you have to regularly report to the government how you use the money and what sort of achievements you have. A couple of reasons why you need to act now, or at least as soon as possible. First of all, grants are available for a limited time. Each grant program has a limited budget, and quite honestly, the number one reason for rejection of a grant application is the lack of funding. So that's very unfortunate, but that's the reality. Even the government has limited budget, and then they allocate that limited budget to the programs. You want to be the first in the line rather than the last. So that's why you want to apply for government funding as soon as there is an opportunity. You're not the only one applying for the government funding. Again, the sooner the better. And keep in mind that, again, I highlighted this here again, but in most cases, unless it's a tax credit, you cannot spend the money until it's approved. That's why you need to apply sooner to make sure that you can spend the money sooner. Now, here's a $1 million question. Who needs a grant writer if there's ChatGPT? And I'm pretty sure you may have tried that. But first of all, please don't look for grants using generative AI, because what it gives you is just the first page of Google without any context or without any thought. From the writing perspective, there are definitely certain pros of using AI, such as time saving, quality content. So when you get the content from AI, it's already grammatically correct. You can also do the version control. The cons, however, that first of all, you gotta pay to get the good results. There's no good tools and models for free accounts. Hallucinations do happen quite constantly, though, so you have to make sure that you read what AI produces to you. But from our perspective, what AI doesn't have is it doesn't have a context, and it doesn't have the history of approvals. It doesn't understand what's the nature of the projects and what's the nature of the companies that get approved. AI could do technically correct thing for you, but then what it doesn't know is that this type of companies, this type of industries may not necessarily qualify, not even qualify, they technically may qualify, but they aren't in a focus of the government. Because if you read, for example, CanExport guidelines, then you find that pretty much any business of any industry and every industry qualifies, but the history of the program and the history of approvals and statistics of approvals suggests us a different thing, that unfortunately that's not the case. So you may spend hours putting together the application that won't really work just because your AI tool doesn't know the context. But I would think there are grant writing agencies that do have this history and this knowledge. You're definitely welcome to contact us after this webinar with any questions, or if you want to discuss any potential projects. Just before we wrap up and before we start our Q&A session, I wanted to highlight some of the other cash flow improvement solutions that you could receive through us as well. Those solutions include tax planning in order to optimize the tax burden, debt remediation, global trade cost reduction, and your overall expense reduction, and also better financing, which means that you can shop around to get a better corporate financing deal for you. That's on top of the government grants writing. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and read some questions. At least I've heard there's some questions that were delivered through the chat. Before that, I want to share a couple of tools. First of all, the free eligibility check tool. You could go on our website, fairgrantwriting.ca/eligibility, and fill out the quick form. It will take you probably 10 seconds or so. And then we will look into the submission and we'll narrow down what specific government grants are here for you. This will save you a ton of time, and then you do whatever you want with this information. The other new tool that we have just developed, and we spent the past 3 months developing this, is AI-powered chatbot. You can access it at fairgrantwriting.ca/chatbot, and you'll get a copy of this presentation, so you'll get those links as well. It takes between 2 to 5 minutes because it's a conversational experience. But the advantage is that after this 2 to 5 minutes, you will get a list of the government grants that are currently available and that are available specifically for what your projects are and what your interests are. So give it a try. It's still in a beta version, so it's not yet publicly available. But as you took some time today to attend this webinar, I'm happy to share this tool with you before the official launch. So give it a try. Let us know how it works. And hopefully it will find you the right grants, because as I said, other tools don't really work well with identification of the grants.